Hello, you're watching World Talks on TVP World. My name is Sascha Fahrbach. We are entering days when a great deal can truly change and change every day. Those are the words of President Volodymyr Zelenskyy as he stated that as U.S., Ukrainian, and European officials go through a key week of intense diplomacy. Now, with Washington's envoy Steve Witkoff and reportedly Jared Kushner, who's Donald Trump's son-in-law, arriving in Moscow Tuesday after marathon talks in Florida, as well as Europe insisting no deal can be made about Ukraine without Ukraine at the table. Pressure is mounting on all sides. And joining us now to discuss the latest is Stefan Korshak, Senior Defense Correspondent at the Kyiv Post. Good morning. Welcome to TVP World.
Good morning, and thank you for having me.
So let's start with this Zelenskyy quote. I mean, we have seen on this subject of change, is change in the air? I mean, the speed of these negotiations seem to have accelerated. Is that typical for this kind of wartime diplomacy? Are those just the optics? Where are we now with that quote and change in the air?
Well, personally, I think it's more optics than hard change, although we shall see. What's most likely happening is a great deal of behind-the-scenes negotiation to, from the Ukrainian side, try and understand how Ukraine can continue to fight with European support, the degree of that support, financing behind that support, and how much the United States might or might not be signed up to it. It's pretty clear that one of the European points is that they are pushing hard for an American commitment to some kind of security guarantee for Ukraine. The Americans, it seems like, are very much opposed to that kind of commitment, at least in the short term. And so the discussion is going on between the Ukrainians and the Europeans as to how best to put forward a common front against the Russians first, but also against the Americans in this context, and at the same time, how best to organize Ukraine's defense collectively, which is an ongoing project because Ukraine is at war.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the security guarantees, that's still something that needs to be analyzed and talked about. I want to come back to that meeting on Tuesday, today's arrival of Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner in Moscow. Any kind of, let's say, expectations from this? Is this going to be a breakthrough moment? Is this going to be disappointment? How do you see this work out?
Well, I wouldn't call it disappointment, but I would say that and probably, common opinion here in Ukraine are very skeptical. There is no expectation by anybody that there might be that Russia might make major concessions or even minor ones. President Putin went on television yesterday and essentially announced that two big towns in which battles have been going on for quite a long time have now been captured by Russia. Simply false, but that was what was announced on Russian television. And he said that Russia intends to create a buffer zone effectively along the entire length of its border between Russia and Ukraine. This is not the positioning of a Kremlin that is looking to solve the conflict quickly. So from the Ukrainian perspective, the chances that the Witkoff visit to Russia might change the Russian stance even marginally are very low.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned also in terms of territory, I mean, this is key. As one of also the things that President Zelenskyy has said are some of those red lines in terms of sovereignty, in terms of concessions. But realistically, how do you see that? Do you think those red lines are at all malleable given political pressures? Will that change again? And I mean, I'm just reminded of those Florida talks. I mean, we'd had over 6.5 hours. Do you think that will have contributed to anything? And how malleable are those red lines of Zelensky's?
If we're talking about territory, I think that at this point in time, the chances of those the Ukrainian position changing significantly is very, very low. It's in the Ukrainian constitution that the president can't just wave a wand and give away territory. That requires the approval of parliament. The population, the Ukrainian population, is intensely against just giving away territory to Russia. without absolute ironclad security guarantees. They are not there. They are not obvious. And were, for instance, the Ukrainian executive branch led by Zelenskyy to try and bypass that, they could very possibly face public resistance. And that's not even talking about the military. The military, they're at war, and they do not want to make concessions to the Russians that won't secure the country, and that's not visible. So the chances of a Ukrainian concession on territory in the short term, I would say, are very low.
Mm-hmm. And also, we jumped on security guarantees a couple of times already in our chat. I want to dig in on that a little bit more. I mean, in terms of what you see in your experience as well, what kind of security guarantees would be at this point? We've talked about them before and haven't really come to concrete conclusions, but what is viable in your mind and enforceable if we talk about security guarantees for Ukraine?
Well, that's a split question. From the theoretical point of view, a security guarantee that's viable is either a Ukrainian military that is so powerful that it can not just repel any future Russian attack, but deter it, that the Ukrainian military is so armed to the teeth and combat ready that the Kremlin wouldn't think seriously about conducting another attack again. That is a huge question of resources and probably not possible even in the medium term. And the second half of that is the will of Ukraine's allies to back Ukraine in case of another armed conflict with Russia. That is, in very simple terms, a question of would a country like Poland be willing to go to war with Russia were Russia to invade Ukraine again? And that is that's a politically explosive topic that really nobody wants to look at openly. And Poland is one of Ukraine's strongest supporters. When you talk about posing that question to the German society, the British society, it's much more complicated. And the Ukrainians understand very well that without that strong, committed, ironclad, concrete backing, any security guarantee is somewhat flimsy. It might be possible, for instance, to deploy NATO troops to Ukraine as some kind of tripwire force. But if, in the case of a future Russian aggression, those NATO troops would simply leave and go back to NATO territory because they don't have rules of engagement to defend themselves in Ukraine, then there's no security. And these are very difficult questions that are so difficult that they really aren't being discussed openly, as nearly as I can see.
Right. I also want to ask you a difficult question. I mean, this morning we're hearing sort of mixed reports claiming that the key city of Pokrovsk has now fallen into Russian hands. I mean, this is coming from the Ministry of Defense of Russia. Certain outlets have not independently verified it. But what do you make of a statement like that? I mean, is this more correct information? I mean, it's an embattled city. The Ukrainians have been trying to hold off the Russians for a while. How much of this is correct? Are they holding out? What's your assessment given the situation?
The short answer is that that's more Kremlin propaganda. The most accurate way to describe the situation in that city, I think you chose the word well, it's embattled. There are Ukrainian forces in the city. There are Russian forces in the city. They are fighting. If you look at just the Ukrainian sources, there is a lot of evidence that the Russians are taking very severe casualties, attempting to push more people in the city because they're walking in under just clouds of swarms of drones and artillery, and the Russian casualty counts visibly are very high. It's not clear at all who has control of the city, or more exactly, it's very clear that nobody has control of the city. And the Kremlin announcement that they have taken the city simply is false. And it is, part and parcel of announcements that Putin made yesterday that two other cities that Russia had been fighting for a long time, one in the north called Vovchansk and one in the east called Kupiansk, were now fully under Russian control. It's simply not so.
Mm-hmm. Talking about Russian control for a moment, I want to ask a question. I mean, one of the main things here, of course, is that Putin wants as much territory as he can get his hands on. One key city, which I think you know a bit about, which the Russians have occupied, is Mariupol. one of the largest cities in southeast Ukraine. I believe there's a book that you've written about this. What kind of, if we're looking at that, what kind of lessons can we draw from how Ukrainians fought there, what it means to live under Russian occupation? What kind of parallels and lessons can we take from that? Give us your take briefly.
Yeah, well, I mean, the book itself is about the siege and the military battle of the city of Mariupol in 2022. But part of its focus is the effect of that intense urban battle had on the citizens there. And it's just horrific. It's a terrible, bloody, lethal thing to live one's life as a civilian when there are missiles and bombs and artillery shells and mortar rounds coming down regularly and unpredictably. And it doesn't just kill people with the strikes. The fact that it's so dangerous to move around makes a person who is injured very likely to die because medical assistance can't get to that person. Once the fighting stops, the infrastructure is completely demolished. To this day, they can't deliver water and electricity reliably to what's left of Mariupol because the fighting had been so intense and the amount of resources necessary to repair that simply haven't been available. And from the Ukrainian perspective, what Mariupol experienced is what the rest of the cities that are on the front line are looking at if the Russians aren't stopped. There are big cities like Slavyansk, Kramatorsk, Kherson that are effectively on the front line. They are being attacked by Russian drones and artillery and missiles and bombs continuously. And the Ukrainian perception is that to cease resistance would be to condemn the people in those cities to not just life in a, well, what most people would call a police state, but in a completely ruined city with really no real resources for survival. It's a terrible thing the Ukrainians are confronting in that context.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think one of those chapters, as you illustrated there, that people must take to heart at the moment of what it means to live under Russian occupation. Look, I mean, given the intensity of all these talks, I mean, as you said, it's optics at the same time. We have that Witkoff meeting in Moscow on Tuesday today. Let's just look a little bit, just briefly, into the next few days or weeks. What, if anything, can we expect in your mind in the next week or two to come, just briefly?
Well, I think that it's possible that there might be some kind of a joint statement or at least indications of a more steps of a united European Ukrainian position to strengthen Ukraine's negotiating position. So, for instance, possibly more sanctions against Russia, possibly more European support to certain weapon systems that Ukraine needs badly. So, for instance, air defense, for instance, personnel support. And it is possible that there might be another flurry of activity on the American side, because it seems like the Americans are running a kind of two-track diplomacy, one top part of which is coming through the White House and is led by Kushner and Witkoff, and another which seems like it at times is more committed to collective resistance to Russia, led by the Secretary of State Rubio. And of course, the Americans are saying, no, 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 they're all united and they have one consistent foreign policy, but the Trump administration really in its foreign policy has not been consistent. So I suppose it is possible that some kind of initiative could come from one of the two parts of the American foreign policy decision-making administration of a different kind of initiative to try and place more pressure on the Ukrainians or more pressure on the Russians.
All right, so we're going to see how those things do develop in the next few days and weeks to come. Look, appreciate all the insights there. Stefan Korshak there from the Kyiv Post. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for watching. That concludes World Talks here on TVP World, but stay tuned. There's much more coming up, so don't go away.